Hello, legendary listeners, and welcome to the Legendary Ladies podcast. This week, Morgan and I are here in a duo episode to talk about something that Kat would be 0% interested in.
0%.
0%, negative 3%, negative 45% interested in. Morgan and I are here to talk about our current obsession, which is Prime Video's My Lady Jane. So, spoiler alert, we are going to talk about the whole series. So, all of
We
season
both
one.
binged it.
Sure did. I was like, I'm going to watch one episode and we'll do a pilot pod.
Yeah, we were like, let's do a pilot pod about it. Like a week ago, maybe maximum.
A week ago.
Yeah. and in that amount of time, we've both blew through the whole season.
Yep. I was in Tech Week. So I'm watching these episodes at midnight. 1 a.m. I've got to get up at 5 a.m. for a 6 a.m. shift and then go do a Tech Week rehearsal, and I could not put it down, Morgan. I was in my bed, eyeballs wide, like Tom and Jerry, where the little pieces of Scotch tape are keeping your eyes open, and I loved every second of it.
Next one.
Oh, yes, I was like, next. And it was just so fun for me. So we're going to talk about the whole series, just kind of our overall thoughts. Those of you who don't know, Morgan and I are huge history buffs, specifically about the Tudor time period.
This period is if you ask me about a different period in a different area of the world, I'm not going to have some good answers for you. But if you ask me about Tudor England, I'm going to be like, hold on, I'm roll my sleeves up and I'm going to immediately start giving you unhinged opinions about things. So this is definitely in our wheelhouse.
Which was why I was so confused at first why this show even existed. Because I didn't know, based on the trailer, I could not
I
tell.
Was like, are they girl bossification? Are they girl bossing a Lady Jane Grey? What is going on?
I was like, she literally is queen for 9 days and dies by the age, I think at age 17.
I was like, is this a limited series? It's gotta be, right? It's gotta be. So I didn't know. I also didn't know going in that it was based on a book series, which I'm going to find and read.
I have one.
Yes.
Someone recommended 2 years ago, the little bookstore that I go to.
That's so funny.
The girl was like, she was like, I need you to read this. I know you're gonna love this, because yes, that is my nerd flex. The girl at the used bookstore knows what kind of books I like.
She's like,
that is my book girl.
This one's for you.
She's like, this. And what she didn't describe to me is that it's an alter history. So I was like, okay, Jane Grey, I'll read it eventually, but it's not on my list. Well,
and I will say, I love those, I love historical fiction. I even biographies. I've read biographies of Anne Boleyn and stuff like that, and some of those the Borgias and stuff. So I will sit down and read a biography. I'll sit down and read historical fiction. But Jane Grey, I didn't feel I'm sure that there are really fascinating histories about her. I'm sure that there's great books, but I feel like I kind of knew her story. I was like, okay, that's fine. So when I saw the trailer, and they leave some very important things out of the trailer, mind you. When I saw the trailer, I was like, okay, weird take on Jane Grey for sure. But okay, I'm in. But then I saw it before I started the series, and I'm so mad that this happened to me. I saw a tweet that spoiled the big surprise of the show, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so mad that I did not go in blind and see this happen, because the amount I would have scream laughed and fallen off the couch, I cannot describe to you. So I did, unfortunately, I said to Mike, I said, I know you're going to watch this with me. I know you're not that excited about it. I know something that might make you more excited about it, but it's going to ruin a big surprise. Do you want me to tell you? He was like, yeah, I want you to tell me. I told him, and he said, oh man, I wish you hadn't told me about that.
Was it that Ethians exist, or that Guilford's a horse?
No, it was that. Okay, we're just getting right into it. Honestly, you shouldn't be listening to this if you haven't checked out this show anyway.
We Guilford's a horse. We're already well into this.
It was the fact that there were shapeshifters in this show.
Yes.
And when I read the tweet, I just stared at it for a while, and I went, I'm sorry, there's what? And then I was like, oh, this might be the greatest show of all time. But I'm
Mm.
really furious that I did not go into the show not knowing
Oh.
this, because they play it pretty straight for, I would say, like
They
the first
do.
half of the first episode.
Yeah.
It's like you're probably in 20, 30 minutes before somebody turns into like a bird and
A
flies
literal
away.
bear.
And
Yeah.
you're like, the fuck?
Mm-hmm. I I went in
It's art.
I went in blind, and it was the greatest thing I've ever done, because I literally, how did I find it? I know that like Prime Video was like, you'll like this, and so it showed me a
Yeah.
brief little clip. But we've talked about this before. Bookstagram changes lives. And in this case, Bookstagram, just the right clip came up where it was Jane and Guilford doing one of their like little battle of wits, and I was like,
Ooh, ooh,
oh, I
ooh,
need
yeah.
to watch this.
Oh, it's a
And so,
love-hate? You didn't tell
oh,
me.
ugh. Um, so I'm like, oh, I'm gonna watch this, and I start watching it, and my jaw is just getting like dropping farther and farther, because as soon as it opens with that opening sequence about the snarky narrator telling us about what the actual history is, and then he literally
Uh-huh.
goes, record scratch, we're not doing that. I'm like, oh my god, it's an alternate history. I
I
was like, I am here for this. And then the Ethian stuff pops up, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me, there's
I
actual
thought
magic in this world.
yeah, I'm glad
What?
if I hadn't known it, I feel like halfway through the first episode, I would have been like, I would have been like getting like a little bit angry and annoying and being like, it's weird that they're not mentioning the Protestant and the Catholic thing. uh,
Okay.
but now I had no issue with it, because I was like, listen, we're putting all that aside. The Reformation, we don't even care about that. There are shapeshifters and people are turning into bunnies.
And you know what I love? And we're going to dig into this. I loved all the way that they effectively mix and match the historical aspects of it, because
Yes.
the Ethianism Verity is Protestant Catholicism. It is the same battles. The way that Mary is very anti Ethian, and she was like the stalwart Catholic. And then, super spoiler alert, at the like last 30 seconds of the season, when you find out Elizabeth is an
Yes.
Ethian, I was like, oh, that's the classic Catholicism, and you understand the break in that. The whole bit where they threw in that Prince Philip of Spain had gotten rid of all the Ethians in Spain, which is the Spanish Reformation, or no, the Spanish Inquisition?
Uh,
No. No, no, no,
mm,
no.
I feel like
That
the
was
Inquisition
earlier.
was a little bit later, but I maybe don't know, that for sure.
Hold
I'm
on.
spot
The
checking this right
Inquisition would have
now.
been Ferdinand and Isabel, and Ferdinand and
Oh, you know what?
Isabel were the
It did
parents of Catherine.
yeah, actually, it was kind of long, the Spanish Inquisition. It looks like it was yeah, oh, what a time in Spain. It was, between 1478 and 1834, which seems intense to me, but
Excessive.
but anyway, I guess they had started in the late 1400s, so absolutely could
Yes,
be sort of a call out to the Inquisition. Anyway, they were doing some messed up stuff in Spain, so
they were. And so, like, the fact that he sends her, like, an Ethian arm, and I was like, oh, this is so good. Like, all of it, just those little nods. The whole, oh, actually, Anne Boleyn was an Ethian. I was like, oh,
yes,
an actual
I love
witch.
that.
So good.
And
I
that's why
loved
they thought
that.
she was like a yeah, I was like,
Oh,
I love
so
it.
good.
I love it.
The bits where, so the history of Jane Grey is that she was queen for 9 days, and then they
Yes.
basically put her on trial, and she's in the tower for a period of time before they execute her. And there are a couple little things that they threw in which just made my history heart so happy. The first is that one of the main documents that they used at Jane's trial to prove that Jane had quote unquote treason and had been a traitor and pretended to be a queen was that she actually signed a document, Jane the Queen. And
Yes.
so in the show where they're like, see, she signed this document, Jane the Queen, that little nod. Did you catch the nod when she was at the scaffold?
Yes. Okay. So it's great that you
Your
mentioned
turn.
that because I wanted to show and share. If you are watching the YouTube version, you will be able to see this. But I want to share my screen. I guess we'll just do the entire screen because oh, hold on. I have it in a different tab, and that's why I can't find it. But yeah, there's a famous painting of Jane
I love
Grey
this painting.
and the
I love this painting.
execution of Jane Grey, and it's so beautiful. And they worked it in to the costuming, and they worked it into basically like the show. So I think
Mm-hmm.
you can see it here, but this is the painting, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit. But
Yeah.
basically, you can see in the painting. She's reaching for the block with her hand because her eyes are covered. She's in like a white dress. And
Mm-hmm.
they did this exact sort of tableau in the show. And I was so impressed
Yeah.
with that because I was like, okay, like the ones who know, right? If you know, you know.
Oh.
Like I was like, I caught that as, like the second she walked out in the white dress,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my God, they're going to do the painting. I
And
was so
apparently,
excited.
historically, she could not find the block, and she literally said, "Help me, sirs! I can't." Like she was scrambling to find the block, like actually on
Yeah.
the ground. And so in this painting, he's helping her find it, but
And
in
I
the
liked that
show, there
they,
is that moment where she
yeah,
can't find it, and she's
where
having, and
she
it's
can't find it
just,
and she's panicking a little bit. And I did
yeah.
like that they mentioned some other queens that got executed and so
Mm-hmm.
some real things from their lives, which is that Catherine Howard asked for the block to be brought in to her like jail cell essentially so that she could practice putting her head on the block, and she
Mm-hmm.
just like practiced it for a long time before she got executed. So sad. And that Anne Boleyn had got a swordsman from Calais, from France, so that she could make sure that she would get beheaded in one strike. A real
Mm-hmm.
concern at the time, because I
Mm-hmm.
believe when Thomas Cromwell got his and got her revenge from beyond, it took them several strikes of the axe to behead him. And listen, that's not something you want. You know, if you're gonna go, you want to go fast.
Yeah, you don't want to be nearly headless, Nick.
No, no, that is not fun.
I loved that. What were some of the other historical? So I think the biggest ones for me were the Protestant Catholicism references with the Atheism and Verity. I really liked that. The things I liked that they changed, obviously, Jane's history is very different. In history itself, Guilford and Jane are married. It's somewhat of an arranged marriage, but it does sound like, according to the history, they did care about each other because when she actually sees Guilford's body go by
Oh,
after he's been executed from the tower, and she cries out, "Oh Guilford, oh Guilford," and she like breaks down in her cell. So she literally watches him roll by in
that always
cart.
gets me. That always gets me about that is that they like they
Story.
brought, yeah, that story is that they brought the body right past so that she would see it. Like it's so messed up. It's like bad enough that they're going to like
Mm-hmm.
execute this 17-year-old who did nothing except be like, uh-oh, I guess I'm queen now. Like what was she supposed to say? No? Like as a woman back then, what was her option
Yeah.
exactly? But like bad enough
Yeah.
to do that, but then to like parade the body of her husband right next to her, like as a reminder, like, oh hey, your time's coming real soon too. I feel like they did something similar to Anne Boleyn, where they had the executions of the men that were accused of adultery with her, like right outside her window where she could see and hear them. So she had to
Mm-hmm.
watch these all happen like days before she got executed. So it's like almost like a psychological warfare on these like poor people, where it's like you've already won, like just let them have their last couple moments in peace.
And I think that the history says that they rolled Guilford's like decapitated body by in a cart, which they do
Yeah.
allude to when Mary tries to convince her that she's killed Guilford on a
Oh,
cart, which of course
yes, that's
do you
right.
remember that when she walks in, she
Yes.
sees it and she
Mhm.
actually cries, "Oh Guilford, oh Guilford." And I was like,
Yeah.
I was like,
I
they
was
did it. Like, I was like, oh my God, what if they actually did it? I was like, they couldn't have done it. They wouldn't be willing
I
to.
know.
I'm
I was
like,
like,
this is
yes.
alternate history.
I was like, but the history girlies are in the room, right? Like we know that
We
you can
know.
clear you like despite how ridiculous this show is, and I do want to preface by saying this show is insane. You could tell that there were people in the room that were like, "Oh no, we know the real history because like we're gonna play
Yes.
with it and we're gonna make things happen that are absolutely out insane, but we're like going to
Mm-hmm.
come from a space of like hitting the beats of the and I that was the other thing I was impressed with is that even though they were doing wild stuff like having Edward jump out of a tower and survive and things like that, they were
Yeah. Yeah.
they were
That was
hitting
real good.
the basic beats of her story. It's like, you know, he nominates her as queen, she becomes queen, like everybody
Mm-hmm.
turns on her. Like they were really hitting all of the like the major parts of her
He was
story. And I
sickly.
he was
Like
sickly. I
his,
was like,
yep.
"Okay."
Yep.
So I thought the way that they did that was good, even though you would be like, "Okay, but if you get to the specifics, it's not at all." And you're like, "No, no, no, but, like, we're on the broad outline wise, we're
Yeah.
still there."
We're still there. And I really like that it is alternate history, but the whole like, oh, Mary Queen of Scots would offer you her support. I was like, ooh,
Ooh,
Mary Queen of Scots is thrown in here. I was like, oh, let's
I
bring this in. Not the Reign Mary Queen of Scots. Let's
I
bring in like the real Queen of
I did
Scots,
think it was
man.
funny. I did think that one I thought was funny because I was like, "Okay, I need to go check my dates," but I'm pretty sure that Mary Queen of Scots would have been, like, incredibly young at this point in history because she was reigning like, Elizabeth was, like, an adult, and I think on the like and was the
Aren't
queen
she and
when
Elizabeth the same
Mary
age, though?
No, I think she was younger than Elizabeth. I think she was, like
I'm going to Google this
10 or
now.
15 years younger than Elizabeth. So I feel like the timeline's a little wonky there. But again, her love interest changes into a horse. So I feel like I can't nickel and dime the specific.
Let's see. So they are 9 years apart. So, oh wait, no, hold on. That was Mary and wait, and her half sister there. Oh, between Mary Tudor and Elizabeth, which this is noticeably incorrect in this
Yeah.
series. They're close to 20 years apart. So Mary, which actually, now that I think about it, I guess it's not that different. I guess they do have a pretty decent age gap between Mary and Elizabeth, in this series. But Mary, Queen of Scots,
Yeah, it says
is
Mary and Mary
9.25 years older.
yeah, about 9 years older. So I think at this point, if Elizabeth is not even close to the like, is not very close to the throne and is basically like a teenager, Mary would have been like, I don't know, 10? So
I,
I don't she's
you know
not on
what
the
though?
throne yet. She's not able to offer support.
It is kind
She's in
of,
France fully at this point.
yeah. It actually is kind of funny though to think about like, what if, what if next season we
Oh my
Mary
god.
Queen of Scots and it's a
Yes.
literal 11-year-old and we're like,
That actually would be phenomenal if
right?
it's like
Wouldn't
because
that be great?
they do have a subplot with her, like, 10-year-old
Mm-hmm.
sister who is a little bit psychotic, and almost definitely a serial killer, and I love that little
Yes.
girl. So if
Oh
they
my
wanna
God,
bring
she's so
in,
good.
like, an 8-year-old Mary Queen of Scots who's just like, "Yeah, screw the English," like, I'm down, I'm there, I'm seated, right?
Oh my gosh. I love that. Well, I mean, Mary Queen of Scots at one point was sequestered in a nunnery. And so if we're accounting that Elizabeth is, we're gonna skew the age here for a second. Let's say in the series Elizabeth is 25-ish, which would
Yeah.
make our Mary Queen of Scots in her mid-teens. Like I sort of love the idea that they like send the little horror off to a like little horror girl, like not
Yeah.
not Horror.
Yeah.
They
The
send
scary
her off
little
to a
girl.
nunnery,
The scary little
and
girl,
she
yeah.
meets Mary Queen of Scots, and they're like, Willy Wonka style, let's be friends. Best friends, and then they're also giving each other murder eyes.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Mary's like,
how
"I'm
fun of
going
a
to blow
plot
up
would
a
that
husband
be?
in the future."
Oh man, I would love that. I'm so here for this
That'd be
new
so
subplot that
good.
we've just written into our
I
show.
I
Um,
do love it. I was like, "Listen, if you wanna give me another evil little girl as, like, a main character,
so
I'm
good.
there for it. I'm there for it."
I think something else that I really liked about the characters that they drew into this is the actual relationship between Mary Tudor and Elizabeth Tudor. Like, they are historically originally meant, like, they were friends. Mary Tudor
Yeah,
practically raised Elizabeth at a certain
it's
point
true.
because she was forced to be her, like, handmaid,
It's so
her lady
messed
in
up.
waiting. It's so
It's so
messed up. And
messed
she
up.
was like, I'm really mad at your mom for like seducing my dad and also like getting my mom basically exiled and murdered, but you're
She's
like a
like,
sweet little baby.
you're an illegitimate bastard, but God, I have been I'm basically
Cute.
your big I am your big sister, so oh
Yep.
look at your cheeks. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is a very funny relationship where she must have absolutely hated this baby she had to take care of. And yet it is a baby, so you can only hold so
Yeah.
much ill will towards it. Like uh
There's a
Mary
spider.
so
Go away.
oh no, not a spider. You've got a spider and
No.
I have my cat
Where's it
like
going?
being very
Okay,
aggressive
I'm gonna
towards
just
my
stay over here in this
oh
corner. There
no.
was a spider.
Is
For
the
those of you who
spider
are
coming
listening,
to
not
you?
watching, I'm recording outside because it's so hot in my apartment. I cannot physically stand to be in there. And there's a spider running around somewhere on this table, so that's cool. Um, but
You
yeah,
have a
like I
spider and
loved that.
I have a cat in front of me who keeps trying to he keeps pushing my laptop out of the way. He keeps trying to eat my headphone cord. So
More.
more exactly, even more than he already has destroyed my headphones.
So you've got Mary and Elizabeth, who are this, this like wild relationship that is really, really cool to watch. Um, but then you watch them become, grow that animosity, which is also something that happens in history.
Oh yeah.
Mary essentially turns against Elizabeth because of their quote differences in religion. But there's a lot of basically, well, everybody wants Elizabeth to be queen and nobody wants Mary to be queen, but the Catholics want Mary to be queen, but the Protestants want Elizabeth to be queen, and Mary feels threatened by Elizabeth. So I love all of that stuff in there. I really, really enjoyed it.
I
Like, I
really
thought that was
liked it.
all really well
I
done.
I feel like my biggest critique was the I mean, I feel like yes, it makes complete sense to have Mary be a mustache twirling villain. Like if you're going to go this way, let's go. They've made her way eviler than she probably was in reality. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like her story is a little bit more nuanced, but if you want a super evil character, she's a pretty good one to go for.
Yeah,
She did kill a lot of people. But
correct.
I wasn't in love with the characterization of Elizabeth in this because I felt like she was a little bit of like a wilting flower. Like we get
Oh,
Jane who
passive.
who gets to be like really aggressive and really cool and really smart,
Mm-hmm.
and Elizabeth like historically is kind of all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And the characterization of it almost felt like the show didn't think that there could be like two smart, capable women, and like if Elizabeth was there like making money moves, it would like
Yeah,
overshadow Jane, which I guess I do understand. Like Elizabeth Tudor is a pretty big those pretty big shoes, so it could be
yeah.
easily overshadow her. But I think they went too hard in the other direction where like this Elizabeth is just kind of like I like the actress, but they're just like not she's not given anything to really do. I think if you're gonna have an Elizabeth who is kind of like keeping out of it and trying to stay like neutral and stay alive, the least you could do is have her sort of do it out of like a self-interested like wiliness. Like
Mm-hmm.
have her seem like she's like smart and like, keeping tabs on like she had like spy masters and stuff. She was like
Yeah.
talking to like astronomers and things. Like she knew what was going on, and like if she was throwing in with say Mary or something, it would probably not be because of a threat or something. Like I would like a more, a little bit more of a forward thinking Elizabeth, or a little bit more of a like a smart sort of ahead of the curve Elizabeth. And this
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth is kind of just like, "Uh-oh, I'm captured."
Little
And you're like,
wallflowery.
yeah, and you're like, "Come on." At one
Yeah.
point, I think that they even said like, "Oh, come on, Elizabeth, you don't have a spine or a backbone or something." And I was like, "Okay, I feel like we could have two female characters that have a
Mm-hmm.
backbone and are smart, and like that's not going to take away from the show."
I think
But
that's a
that was
really good critique
yeah.
that I never really. I never really connected, but that is something that definitely could use some work. And I wonder if part of it is that they wanted to hold off on the secret that she was an Ethian till the very
I
end,
think
and they
so.
didn't want
Yeah.
to sneak that in. They kind of wanted the idea of, oh, you see this passive little wallflower? Guess what? She's an Ethian, ladies
Guess
and
what? She's
gents.
been an Ethian this whole time.
Whole time.
She's literally a foxy lady.
Yes. So I think that that's hopefully where they're going with that, but that's a really solid critique because she is definitely supposed to be a character who has a lot of oomph. And she just doesn't have a lot of oomph in this.
Yeah, it's hard
But
to imagine
Mary
her.
does.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine her as like becoming the historical Elizabeth, given like the
Mhm.
characterization
Good
of
point.
this season, because she
Yeah.
just seems like she's very much in the background. She's not really like she doesn't seem to have like the cleverness that Jane has in this season. So it's hard to be like, oh yeah, that's the future, the future Elizabeth. It's just kind of like, okay, and there's Elizabeth. But
Yeah.
I feel like as a critique, it's not honestly that bad. Like we're
That
used to
bad.
this watching these historical things where it's like, oh, okay, well that's completely wrong about that person, but okay. And I was
Yeah.
like, you know what? This is my biggest critique about a show where people turn into horses. I feel like that's not bad.
So let's talk about some of the other wild and crazy characters, and then we're gonna get to our two favorite,
The
Jane and Guilford.
romance.
Ugh, I love them. So we've got the mom, Lord Francis Grey. Then
Yes,
you've
love her.
got Lord Dudley, and then Lord Stan Dudley, who are two. So the Dudleys, more
Okay,
the
can we
Dudleys.
talk about the fact I just want to like let's history nerd, right? I want to talk about the fact that the Dudley family had 13 children and not a single one of them was named Stan. Why, when you have a pool of 13, would you not pick an actual Dudley to have like I
That's
don't
funny.
care
I didn't
about the
know that.
characterization of Stan, but I when they said Stan, I said absolutely no way. Absolutely no way was there a
Stan.
Stan in in Tudor England. So I like looked up the Wikipedia, and that's when I kept on going down, like, how they're like, spouse, like mother, father, like
Mm-hmm.
children. The children section just goes and goes and goes. Lady
Mm-hmm.
Dudley was pregnant for like most of her life, apparently. I was like, this poor
Yeah.
woman. I would be like, stay away from me at that
Yeah.
point. So they had 13 children. None of them named Stan. Like I feel like
None of
you
them
just
named
just
Stan.
go with a different Dudley name. I thought that
That's
was very
funny.
funny. I was like, Stan is the
I
best
loved
though,
that.
so
I
I
love
I
that.
can't argue. I also
I
really really loved the actor who played the elder Dudley. Uh,
yes.
I don't remember what his first name was, but because I think
It's
they
literally Lord Dudley.
Lord Dudley. Yeah, Lord Dudley's actor is phenomenal. I
Yeah.
absolutely love him. He is very funny in every scene.
I think what I really liked about them is that even though initially you're like, I think I hate them, you're allowed to grow to like them. Because initially you're like, ugh, Stan. He's such a he's just not a great guy. He's a total sleaze. And Lord Dudley, you're like, you're a conniving backstabber. And you
Mhm.
discover that ultimately they absolutely love Guilford. Like they are doing everything they can to protect him. That yes, they have like a crisis of conscience moment, but ultimately they're there for their family, they're there for their brother, their son. It's really endearing. I liked the fact that I was able to like organically and naturally grow to like these characters. Um,
Yeah, me too. And especially because the romance between Stanley and Jane Grey's mother is so ridiculous, but it continues to be so funny throughout the entire series or through the entire season, where Stan is just like silent, like like pining after her,
oh, it's
and
so
she's just
good.
like, I'm kind of trying to do like a love it and leave it situation. Stan's like, no, I am in love with you. It's like she's like, all right, Stan, calm down.
I love
So
when he's
good.
literally serenading out her window because so again, I was in Tech Week for my show, right? So for those of you who don't know, I'm doing Much Ado About Nothing. It's a Shakespeare show, which is I loved this because our Benedict and Beatrice in Much Ado About Nothing, it's a very quote enemies to lover battle of wits. They're super snarky. We play it really snarky. We really lean into the like, oh, they're just having so much fun arguing with each other and they're pretending that they would absolutely murder each other and yet they would murder for each other. Like we're playing that trope up a lot. And so every time I was watching some of these scenes, I would like get like little vibes of Much Ado About Nothing in there. And the moment where Stan is serenading outside of Francis's window and just singing on a lute, I was like, this is the most ridiculous Shakespearean comedy shit that I've ever seen.
It's so
And I
good.
love it. I absolutely love it. I was just so entertained by that. The sisters, who again you think are going to be these like little side characters, no, they end up being really great characters. The little terror, that she's hilarious. Who was that? Margaret. And then the middle
Oh
one's
my God.
Catherine.
Yes.
Look, they only had about 6 names for
Yes. Oh,
females in this time
we
period.
we joke
Catherine,
about this
Margaret,
a lot. Yeah. Which is that there
Jane,
was only like 5 names back then.
Elizabeth.
In
Yeah,
fact,
and what else?
I believe Jane Grey's sisters actually were named, I want to say Mary and Margaret, but I'm sure the creators and the writers of the show were like, how many Marys can you have? And that's a great question. And Tudor England is going to test that theory of how many Marys you can
Yep,
possibly have. Mary Queen of Scots famously had 4 attendants, all also named Mary.
that's
Everybody was just
wild.
kind of named Mary back then. So I understand why they were like, we can't, how many Marys can we have? We got to start changing some of these names.
I love it.
But yeah, I
Um,
especially loved the little murder child. I thought she was absolutely amazing.
yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Um, I very much enjoyed getting a chance to see like the inner workings of that, and also I still don't know how I feel about Frances. I don't know if I like the mom or not.
Yeah, Frances,
So we'll see.
I had mixed opinions about. I thought it
Hmm.
was interesting because I do think that they're historically they're in sort of a gray area because
Hmm.
there is evidence of her having complained about the treatment of her parents to people.
Hmm.
Jane Grey at one point complains to a tutor like, I can never do
I do remember that
anything
now.
right. I can never do anything right, and they're always pinching me and hitting me, and like I'll spare you from the details. Basically, I reread the Wikipedia, but I do remember that from, I don't know, Amy, have you ever seen and I'm sure it holds up fantastically. There is a 1986 movie called Lady Jane. That is about Lady Jane Grey. It's a
I've
romance,
seen
of course.
clips. I've
It's got
seen clips.
Helena Bonham Carter. It's got
I've seen
Carrie
clips.
Ilways, yeah, from The Princess Diaries. It is
Yep.
actually very enjoyable. I watched it like after I watched The Tudors like years ago,
Uh
and
huh.
they do the same thing. They have her parents be like really abusive, and it's like, well,
Yeah.
you know what? Maybe, right?
Probably.
We have enough evidence to think maybe they weren't very nice to her. She certainly
And
didn't think so. On the flip side, she was 16, so
yes.
it's like,
Yeah.
my parents won't get me the newest hot book on Protestantism. They're abusing me. Who
I
knows?
definitely think they play a little bit into it, because if you also think about it, like from a fair majority of the history, Jane did not want to be queen. Like
No.
she had no
Mhm.
interest in this, and she was 100% forced into it, and then she literally died because of it. Was
Yeah.
murdered because of it.
She
Like
was
it's the
right to not
ultimate
want it.
definition. Oh, yeah, correct. She was like, I really don't want to do this. It feels like a bad life choice,
This
and they were
feels
like,
like a
Nah, you'll be
trap,
fine.
you know? She wasn't stupid. She was like, "Oh
She was
no."
not. Okay, so let's talk about the best part of this whole show. Jane and Guilford, the ultimate enemies to lovers, knife to the throat, battle of wits, sneaking into the bedroom, so close you think they're going to kiss but then they don't,
And they
die
don't.
for each other. Romance trope you've ever seen.
It's
Like,
very funny to me that he's a horse. I feel like they're just trying to appeal to all the horse girls out there. As somebody who grew up with like a lot of My Little Ponies, it works.
it does.
I was like,
I
oh
grew
my
up with so
god,
much Saddle
he's
Club. I'm here for this.
he's so majestic.
I remember the moment in the end of the first episode where I first off, I loved that they did tell Jane what was going on. Like, they married and then they didn't keep that secret. I hate miscommunication tropes. I think I would
Yeah.
have been really frustrated if it took like 4 episodes for her to find
Oh,
out. They're like, no,
that would
end
have
of the
been
pilot, she's gonna
so
find out.
annoying.
And I literally, Morgan, it happens and I go, you've got to be kidding me. He's a fucking
He's
horse.
a
Were
horse.
the actual words that came out of my mouth. And then I did that thing where I was like, this show is coded for me. This show was written for me. And then in the second episode where they're traveling and he looks back at her as a horse with his long face
Oh my
and
God.
his slow blink, I was like, this is so good.
As somebody who is a
Everything about this.
co-host on a Supergirl podcast, I have to say, this was also great for me as well. It's like a real life Comet the Superhorse.
Oh my
We're getting
God,
in there.
that's
We're
so
doing
true.
He's a sexy horse.
Man, that takes me back. Oh, it's so good. It's just
In the
everything
finale,
about.
we were watching the finale,
Oh my
and there's
God.
a point
It's
in
so
the
cheesy.
finale when the horse is galloping across the fields trying to get to Jane. My husband turns to me and he goes, "Is this working for you?" And I said, "Yes. I'm sorry to say yes, it is." And then I was like, "He's so
Oh,
majestic."
oh, it was so good. I literally was like,
It's so beautiful. Your love.
I'm like, race boy. And they threw in like all of race boy. You gotta get to her. And I'm like a fucking sobbing mess, right? I'm just losing it. I'm like, you gotta rescue her. And then he gets there and it's turning nighttime and he's like, no, I need the speed. And it's so good and it's so cheesy and I love every minute of it. And I think that these two actors have spectacular chemistry.
Such good chemistry.
So good. And I've said this before, one of the key factors to chemistry is that level of physical and proximity comfort, and they just did it so well. The two of them are just play with each other physically so well on screen. Like, sorry, we have wild animals running around the yard.
Oh God.
They block it so well. The way that they block some of these scenes, like it's the second to last episode where she's under house arrest and he sneaks through the window. I went back and literally we rewatched this scene today because it popped in my head and I was like, I don't need to watch this again. Where she's like, you need to leave, and she pushes him out and she turns to go and she stops and you see him come from behind her, step right behind her and then kiss her neck. I was like, oh God, you got me. There it is.
Hot.
I was like, there it is. And like their whole romance was built on honesty and communication, which is so wild because if you think about it, he hid the fact that he was a horse from her.
I know.
And he did keep the secret of what happened to his mother for a long time, but he eventually opens up to her and their natural growth and evolution of how they actually fall together and fall in love together is just so beautifully done. I love every second of their relationship. I could talk about their part of this show episode by episode, scene by scene, break down why I love it. The whole "you married me for my brain."
Oh my God. I was gonna say that "you married me for my brain" thing was very, very funny because like you always kind of hear like, oh, like they marry, especially in the Tudor times, they were like, oh, she's so beautiful. And then she finds out that he married her because he heard she was smart and thought she could find a cure for his shape shifting. And she's like so turned on when she finds out that he married her for her brain. Do you mean you married me for my brain? It's so good.
So good. It's so good. So those of you who are listening live, my laptop battery, I'm outside, right? My laptop battery is about to die. So I'm going to move inside and Morgan's going to talk about some history or something. I don't know what.
I will vamp until Amy returns. Or we'll cut out a lot of silence. We'll find out which. Yeah, I really liked the development of that relationship from the beginning where they like meet at the I guess it was like an Athenian bar and they don't really like each other. And I'm a big sucker for the like hate to love trope. I don't know what it's called. Enemies to lovers, like that trope. I would not call them actual enemies since like the second she meets him, she's like, "Oh, that boy is cute." And then drops the "Do you go here often" line on him, which I thought was very funny because it's such a bad line. But them having like this friction in their relationship initially and kind of being snarky with each other and like doing a little sword fight was or I guess it was a knife fight, which is much more dangerous than a sword fight because you have to be so much closer. Maybe don't knife fight with your I don't know, beloved or whatever. Don't do that. That's not like a good way to flirt. But they when they were doing that, I was like, oh, they've got such good chemistry. And I think the development over the 8 episodes of them like, meeting and kind of being into each other, but not necessarily liking each other initially, and her wanting a divorce, and trying to like get out of the marriage, and then to the end where they're like saving each other's lives. I thought that was such a good development of that relationship.
I loved not only the growth of the relationship, but the way that the narrator helped frame it. Like getting just enough in her head to give you an idea of what she was thinking, but also bring some realism to the fact that this is a ridiculous relationship. The narrator is its own spectacular character in this series. Like the bit where when they meet at the bar that you were talking about,
Yes.
and she's like, "Do you come here often?" And he says, "This Jane is the first person to ever use that line. She's also the first person to immediately regret it."
It's so
Loved it.
good.
It's so good. But then like adding these internal monologue ideas about Jane knew it was wrong or Jane knew it was right or Jane was sure Guilford thought this, but actually that. Like it gives you just enough of an edge to make her character even more interesting and to build their relationship um more solidly. Like I think that this is one of those examples where a narrator in a series really adds. I think it was a really, really wonderful choice. I loved that the narrator stuck around the whole time. I thought it was superbly well done. I think it was part of my favorite parts, but I think one of the reasons that the narrator lands so well is because it lends itself to creating a, a really kind of it paints a really effective portrait of Jane and Guilford together, and that's one of my favorite parts about this whole series is just how organic their relationship grows. And we've talked about this before, Morgan, when we were talking, when we used to do Legends of Tomorrow, and we would talk about Ava Lance and how that was one of our favorite things, is a natural relationship that just grows and blossoms over time. And that part of this really, really struck me because then you believe it. The
Yeah.
idea of lust at first sight versus love at first sight that the narrator plays
Mhm.
into,
Yeah.
it's so believable. And I absolutely love these two characters.
And I really like it too because sometimes you'll be watching like a show like this and the characters, like the love story is their big plot or their big storyline. And what I really liked is that both characters have their own sort of subplots away from the romance
Mm-hmm.
plot, which makes them feel more
Yeah.
well rounded. And it makes me like the
Yeah.
relationships more because I feel like I like this person, I like this person, and I like them together. So, like, yeah, I want them to get together. It's not like, oh, well, this romance is the only thing happening to them right now. So, of
Mm-hmm.
course, I want it to work out, but it's because they don't have anything else going on. And I think that they did a really good job of obviously Jane has a lot going on with
Mm-hmm.
becoming queen. And then Guilford also has a lot going on because he's fighting this sort of Ethian werewolf style curse he's got and trying to find a cure and then kind of coming to terms at the end of the season with the fact that there is no cure and he has to kind of learn to live with it. And I thought that that was a really good journey for like they both had their own character journeys that they were going on and they could kind of share
Mm-hmm.
things together where it's like their whole story wasn't just the romance, which I really appreciate it.
I agree. I think that was one of the best parts about this show. And I think like Jane and Guilford is probably going to go down as one of my all-time favorite TV romances for a lot of different reasons. The fact that Jane was so confident in herself, that Guilford was not, that it was not the man trying to fix the girl, it was actually the girl trying to fix the man. The fact that they took some of those romance tropes, flipped them on his head, but also didn't make it feel like they were trying to take a romance trope and flip it on its head. They really worked hard to make this a natural, organic chemistry. And I think that comes a lot from the natural chemistry of just these two actors. The casting is so well done. And the chemistry can be built. You can grow it. There are techniques you can use, ways you can make chemistry feel like chemistry, ways that you can get two characters to physically look like they're in love or kind of add that spark. But a true chemistry is there's a natural inclination to it, a natural sympathy, as Mr. Darcy would say.
Ooh.
Or is that Jane Eyre? Who says
That's a great
natural
question.
sympathies? It's either
That I
Mr.
don't know.
Rochester or Mr. Darcy. Oh, it's gonna drive me nuts. It's one
Jane.
of them. Which, by the way, the guy who
Yes,
plays
it's Jane Eyre.
yes, I was like it's there. I'm like, I actually don't think it's Darcy. But the guy who plays Guilford, there's a clip where where the two leads are talking about the show, and at one point they actually bring up Mr. Darcy, and he does a Mr. Darcy
Oh, really?
like voice and clip, and I was like, oh gosh, like this
Oh, hello,
cannot be.
hello
I was
there.
like, is this allowed to be online? Because I think I like this
Ooh,
should be behind
ooh.
a pay screen, a paywall. Like, whew. I was
Do
like,
I have
that
to
quote.
age verify to?
Yeah, it was whew, there his name is Edward, and I was like, hi Edward, who are you?
Oh, hello there. It's like
Hello
hot
there.
things for nerds. You're just like, oh yes, tell me
Did
more,
you just
Mr.
say Mr.
Darcy.
Darcy quote? Whew.
Ooh, is it gonna be hot in here?
Or is it just you? Like so I really I just I wish that we had time to like sit through and go each through each episode, but I'm a big nerd for book talk romance tropes, because here's the thing, guys. Real life is kind of wild right now.
It
Real
is.
life real tough right now. I'm working 2 jobs, doing a play, and trying to find a way to make money for rent. We are at the point where I'm like, look, I just need a little escapism. And so escaping into a world where men turn into horses, yet also climb up the actual vines to get into your bedroom to wake you from a dead sleep, for her to then push you and be like, no, I need you to leave so that I can protect you. And he comes back in and he's like, yeah, but not before we make out and have some fun. Like,
But
a
not
girl
before
needs these
sexy
things,
time.
okay? A girl needs these things because it's just so nice to have that escapism. And it's something that not everybody, that's not the way that they necessarily want to escape. That's not necessarily the thing that they enjoy. But
in
for us
our
book
in
talk
our in our
girlies,
hierarchy of needs, I think it's like historical romance, horses. Historical romance with horses. So we're
it's so
there.
accurate though. That's
This
exactly
is
it.
this is for us, you know. This is for
Yes.
us.
You know what I
Your
like though?
mileage may vary.
There was nothing about this that I didn't like. Like, there are some things we can nitpick about, like Elizabeth's character. I think at times Mary Tudor was actually a
Over
little
the
too
top.
over the top.
I agree. Yeah, there were
Um,
some times where I was like, "All right, we're going a little too hard now."
too
Aren't
hard.
we?
Like, someone needed to tell her or the directors or the writers to just take it down just a notch. We are at a
Yes.
level 11. I just want a level 10, maybe a 9. So there was a little much for me. The kind of dominatrix thing she had between her
Yes.
and
A little
Seymour
weird.
was a little much for me.
Little weird.
Um, I wish they had either had her be that or the really over the top. Both of them together was a little much for me. But when you're talking about shows that are like coded for us, like these things that you know you're going to like, the romantasy, the fantasy, the historical fiction stuff. Remember Carnival Row on Prime Video?
I never watched that, but I have been told Sarah watched it and really highly recommended it, and I have to put it on my list. But I've heard it's great.
It was one where I started watching it and I loved it. And I watched the whole first season and I was like, this is coded for me. It's fairies, it's romance, it's touch her and you die. But there were an unfortunate amount of things that didn't work, that
Yeah.
it washed out the things that did. And this is the
Mm.
opposite. This is enough things that are wild and crazy that did work that kind of help you forget about the things that didn't. And I wonder if it's kind of, now that I'm thinking about it, Morgan, I think we have a type. I think we like shows that are not afraid to just go off the rails and
Yes.
be so ridiculous that they're endearing. It's the
This
Legends
is
of Tomorrow
always
effect.
Yes, this has always been a genre of show that I love. I was a big Gossip Girl fan. I was a big Pretty Little Liars fan. Like, unironically, I loved those shows because those
Mm-hmm.
shows, like, knew what they were, and they were like,
Mm-hmm.
"Yes, we're gonna be campy and big and ridiculous, but we're also going to have, like, heart and, like, characters that you care about." And I think
Mm-hmm.
that you can do that really easily, and it can be great. It's a lot of times the shows will go too far into the camp and then it becomes like Glee. No offense to Glee,
Mm-hmm.
but some offense to Glee. Um, or they'll be like, no, 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 we are a serious drama, and you're like, you just did one of the most insane things I've ever seen happen on
Mm-hmm.
television. You can't be a serious drama anymore. A dog just ate a man's heart. Like, I'm so sorry, One Tree Hill. And I think that like the shows that are self-aware do really well. And this show has like the campy narrator who is like, this
Mm-hmm.
isn't going to be, this, we're going off script. It's an alternate history. Everything's crazy. And I think that they knew what they were about, but they still focused on the fundamentals because they could be as crazy and out there as they wanted. But if they didn't have good characters, if they didn't have like good story, it still wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
enjoyable. It would just be a train wreck.
Yeah.
So I think that like a lot of people see stuff like this, like Legends and shows like this and think like, "Oh, that can't be that hard." And I think it actually is incredibly difficult to like toe that line where you are
Mm-hmm.
being heightened reality and you still need to keep the characters grounded because you still need to care about these people and their relationships, and you can't go too far afield or else it then starts to get hard to like care about the characters.
It makes me think a little bit of The Boys. You know how The Boys on Prime Video is just super over the top, but it knows what it is. It knows
Yep.
it's violent. It knows that it's over the top. It knows that it is a political satire with a literal knife in the gut. Like it is meant to jar you. It knows what it is. I There was part of me that was worried that there would be criticism of My Lady Jane. That people would say, "Oh, it's too over the top. Oh, the horse girly thing is ridiculous."
How
And
first off, how
there's
dare they?
how yeah, but I was worried that there would be that critique. And I don't see it. And I think one of the
No.
reasons that we don't see a lot of that critique, at least that I haven't seen, and that might maybe I just my algorithm is like, you love My Lady Jane, we're only showing you good stuff.
We all
I
love it.
think
But I feel like I looked at and I looked it up after I think I started it, and I see that it's been
uh-huh.
actually like fairly well reviewed. And I think it is because the show tells you from the front, like, this is gonna be campy, it's gonna be over the
Mhm.
top, it's gonna be fun, like, be prepared. I think it
Yep.
prepares the audience for what they're gonna get, and I think they do a very good job with it.
Yeah, and the tone of the first episode is consistent throughout the tone of the rest of the series. And that's really important when the pilot matches.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. They're not, like,
I
trying to pull
just
a bait and switch with you.
Exactly. I think it's just a really well done, well identified, well-toned show, and it's not going to be for everybody. But what's really interesting is even though it's not Kat's cup of tea, I think that if she tried it, well,
Mm.
part of me says maybe she would like it. I think she would not. I don't think she'd be able to get past the magic part of it and the history part of it. But the
Oh,
characters are
yeah.
really good. The
I
characters are really
sometimes
good.
forget
We know.
I sometimes forget Kat's not, like, a big magic person either.
Yeah. So I
I
was like,
I did
this is
struggle,
not written for
I
Kat.
struggled a little bit with the Ethian world building, in terms of, like, okay, everybody can change into, to creatures, but then he can only he's like a werewolf, basically. He can't control his change, and I like that critique early on in the season, they sort of address it head on with the fact that, like, it's not that, he's, like, some unique person, it's that, like, trauma has informed how he is
Mm-hmm.
able to transform, because at first I was like, "Wait, why are the rules different for him?" And I like that they got into that, and that was, like, a big part of the season.
I I was like shell shocked when they have that moment where they're both about to be executed, right? And he's looking across the square at her and she's literally trying to find the block and like she's gonna die. And I actually was really surprised that in that moment they didn't have him turn into a horse and like trample everybody and go
I
rescue her.
know.
I thought it was gonna be then.
I
And
was waiting. I was like, oh, he's gonna take control of his own destiny now.
uh-huh. And there's something nice about having the stakes of that moment being like, oh, it's actually not happening. Like
Yeah.
he's not damsel in distress rescuing her right now. Like things are just not going right. And then the moment where he finally, like, he knows he loves her, but the actual verbalization of, I think, not only knowing that he loves her, but in that moment when she says I love you as well, I think that's a key factor in what gave him his ability to shift. Because if you look at the history of Guilford and what he's told you, you know, he's talking about how he blames himself for his mother's death, and he's sure his brother and his father blame him for his mother's death. He's never learned to forgive himself, and he doesn't think he's worthy of being loved. So I wonder if his shift is less about him knowing that he loves her and more about kind of Beauty and the Beast style, recognizing that he is loved no matter who he is. Because it's not when
Ooh.
he says, I love her, it's when she returns it and says, I love you too. Because in that moment, she's about to die, right? He knows he loves her. She has not yet told him, I love you.
That's true.
So
It's
he
so Beauty and the
finally
Beast coded.
shifts. I know. He finally shifts and gets control of his power when he realizes he's worthy of love. And now that I'm like thinking about this, that's all in this whole series. Him being like, I am detestable. I am not worth loving. I am this monster. I'm the reason my mother died. I hate myself for it. No one should love me. My family can't love me. And yet his family comes to rescue him. Jane goes to rescue him. She has the opportunity to flee and she comes to him and rescues him. Like that whole idea that he is worthy of being loved and that's what gives him the power. I think that's where that core of that energy comes from for him, and I hope they explore that idea in season 2 because I think
Oh,
that would be really interesting to go for. Ugh, I love see this is why I love this kind of stuff, Morgan. I
I know.
love the realism moment because how many people on this planet have been in a relationship and been like, okay, I love you, but do you really love me? But do you really love me? Okay, but you say
Mm-hmm.
you love me, but do you really love me? Would you really climb onto a burning pyre for me and stay with me as we die? Yeah, okay, I guess you love me. Like, right?
So
Like,
touching.
he literally was like, you're gonna start burning. And literally, she's like, oh my God, like, I'm physically catching on fire right now. And she was willing to stay there and sacrifice herself, which is another factor of it. Sure, he's willing to die, but is he willing to let her die for him? It's just, it's the reason I love romance stuff like this so much because it's just, it gives you all the warm and fuzzies inside. I don't know how to describe it any other way than it's
It's always
just deep diving into that.
and like the good romance stuff is character studies, which I think we really like. Um, and that's what,
Yes.
if
Amen.
they're doing a good job, it's getting into the specific characters and their flaws and their strengths and things like that. And I think we see that in that scene where she is willing to put herself at risk and he realizes
Mm-hmm.
that because she loves him, that he is lovable and he then can turn into a horse at will.
Yes.
It's
And
beautiful.
now
Like
that I
all
think
love
about
stories, that's when he turns into a horse at will.
and I mean, it is character study. And I think that we can look at this one moment, right? We can take this one moment where they're on the pyre and he is deciding, like, he finally gets control of his powers. We can break it down by how we have seen his character and her character grow over the season. And some of the hardest romances to watch are romances where characters makes decisions that don't make sense. Like Bridgerton season 3.
Ooh,
I have
oh, hot
thoughts
takes.
about
Hot
Bridgerton season 3.
takes.
I think that Bridgerton season 3 took the character growth that they had built for Colin and Penelope, not only for the first 2 seasons, but from the first 4 episodes and the second half of the season, took it, crumpled it up into a ball, threw it into the freeway. I think that they
Oh,
completely lost the thread of those two characters in the second half of the
damn.
season. Hot takes. And
Hot
that the
take.
character choices that those characters make, can I find the thread of those character choices? And now that I'm thinking about it, I think that that was one of the main reasons that I just did not like
The second half of
that
season 3.
the second half at all. At all.
Oh.
I actively disliked the second half of Bridgerton. Oh yeah.
Ooh. I'm excited
Which
to
is
talk
actually
about
on
this.
trend. I know, it's actually on brand because I did not finish season 1 of Bridgerton. I only
Really?
finished season 3 of Bridgerton because I knew we had to talk about it.
Ah,
Season 2 is the only episode or the only season of Bridgerton that I actually like.
that
And
you
I have put this
finished.
hot take on Instagram. And the hot take is
Oh.
that My Lady Jane is better than Bridgerton overall. And that My Lady Jane
Ooh.
and Bridgerton season 2 are on par. But that's because you
Ah.
watch Antony's growth. You watch Kate's growth. And maybe that's one of the reasons that I love Enemies to Lovers so much, is because there's active growth in the thread you can follow. But when we're
Because there
watching
has to be
romances,
growth. Like, you
yes,
can't write an enemies to lover and not have there be growth, because otherwise they just remain enemies. Like, you have to get
correct.
them, you have to take them on some kind of journey, or else
Yes.
don't ever get to the romance. So yeah, it does kind of force the writers, or forces the creators, to give them a character arc of some kind. Like, it could be maybe not as successful, but they have to do something, because they can't start and end in the same place. So that's true. That's a good
Mm-hmm.
point.
And I think that that kind of maybe lends itself to why we love these kind of shows so much. These shows that really do well. Maybe next time we watch a romance, we'll look at that from the get-go. Like, oh, is this the reason that we're so attached to these characters because we're watching them grow? Like, is that the anatomical reason why Enemies to Lovers does so well? Or I guess the physiological reason. The anatomy is what, the physiology is how. Um, the physiological reason
Mm.
behind why Enemies to Lovers really works is because you can watch all the different bits weave together and create that coherent story. Um, I love that we just had this revelation. Like, I love that we just connected why we love Enemies to Lovers so much, especially in
Yes.
TV shows, and why this just seems to sell so well. And I think it is just a really well done characterization. I am going to Comic-Con next week. I really secretly hope that there is My Lady Jane writers or
Oh my
crew or
god.
actors or a panel, because I
Please.
will be number one in
Please.
line. I will be there if you guys are going to be at Comic-Con. I'm going to be there all week. So will Kat. We're actually going
And
to get
so will
together.
Kat.
Morgan is not.
I will not
Um,
be there. Womp
it's so sad.
womp.
Wah wah. Um, but yeah, I really really hope that there are some writers at Comic Con so I can just, you guys, I love this show.
Tell
And
them
now
how
we
much we
definitely
love
have
it.
to read the book. Yes, I will.
Yes,
I will
I
tell them
can't
all
wait.
the things.
I'm gonna get the
Let's
book
maybe
now.
we'll do a whole episode on the book. Cause but
Ooh,
now I also
yes.
don't like, I don't know where
I
it ends and I
I'm
don't want to spoil
conflicted.
myself.
I'm conflicted because I have to say, I like that season 1 covers her historical story from, like, the beginning
Uh-huh.
of when she's, like, kind of becomes important to, like, the end of when she becomes important. But, where we leave off, they can literally take the show anywhere now, because they are now off the page of history, essentially. Like, in season 2, they can go as far afield as they want, and, like, I'll just accept it, because I'm like, "Well, he did finally learn how to turn into a horse. Why am I nitpicking the history?" So I'm excited and nervous about where season 2 goes, because I feel like they had a nice outline in season 1, and I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if the removing that outline will make it more fun, or if it will, like,
Um,
if they'll kind of bounce in different directions, and, like, it'll be like a Game of Thrones situation where it kind of, like, gets herky jerky. I'm hoping not, though.
I think we still have a pretty solid season 2 arc, which I think at this point is getting rid of Mary and getting Elizabeth on the throne. I think season 2, like, that seems like a good historical chunk, is Mary's reign and the Catholicism slash Ethionism
Yeah.
battle that we've gonna like the religious battle that's going on. I think that would be a good course for season 2. Is that maybe what they're choosing to do, kind of to your point earlier, is maybe they're gonna make Jane that leader of the like atheism revolt and the Catholic revolt, and
Ooh.
while Elizabeth is still in the court, maybe as an Athean, so right, she's got to be eventually become queen. Mary's eventually got to get out. Like
Yeah, that's
historically, Mary's
true.
got to go. That Elizabeth needs to become queen, and maybe to do that, she needs the quote Protestant slash Athean support, and maybe Jane is going to become that support
I mean,
for her.
they've already introduced Philip of
The
Spain.
Dudleys.
So
Yep.
so season 2 could be Wyatt's
Ooh.
rebellion, right? Like,
Yep.
which the Dudleys were
Very much
involved
so.
in, very much so. And I
Yep.
mean, besides Jane and Guilford being alive, they can do a lot of the historical stuff
Yep.
as well. I also completely forgot to mention, as we were talking about things that we liked, that like Edward got to have like a Prince and the Pauper storyline, which is really cute
Which
too.
we hadn't talked about Edward yet, and his whole thing. The what is the one thing the narrator says where he's like,
His like gay
Edward had
awakening.
always assumed that men were the same as women underneath the clothes, but it
Yeah, and
turns out they're not. And he's like, oh.
he sees her naked and he's like, "Oh, yeah, no thanks, I guess."
No, I
It's
don't
so
like
good.
that.
So
Oh, it
good.
was so good. Edward's character so good, and Edward's grandma, who is
Yes, there's definitely something going on there.
yeah, and that's historically Henry the Seventh's mom.
Um,
So his
Henry the
grandma.
7th's wife, right? Would be his grandmother, because Henry the 8th would
Yes.
be his father. So then, yeah, so it would have to be,
Yes.
yes, Henry the 7th, who I don't actually know very much about.
It would be
So
Elizabeth Woodville.
yes, right?
But I
Yes.
thought Elizabeth Woodville, not no, not Elizabeth Woodville. Sorry, the daughter. It would be Ca- Catherine Woodville. No, I think her name is actually Lizzie. I think it is. Yeah, no, it's Lizzie because it's the oldest sibling, and the oldest daughter is named after Elizabeth. So Lizzie Woodville, but I'm pretty sure Lizzie Woodville died
Yeah, Elizabeth, oh, actually,
before
Elizabeth
Arthur.
of York would have been
Yes,
Henry the
which is
7th's wife.
yes,
And yes, she
and
dies in 1503, so there would have not been an overlap. But you know what? I'm just gonna let it go. I
yeah,
don't
that's
care.
fine.
I just don't care.
Maybe it's the grandmother on the Seymour side, on
Oh,
Jane
it
Seymour's
could
side. Maybe
be.
it's
I didn't think about
yeah.
that.
Now
It
we got
could
to figure
be
out that history.
Jane
I mean,
Seymour's mother.
yeah,
Mother? Yes. Yes, mother.
yeah. We'll have to figure that out. I'm very excited. This is gonna be really fun. I'm very excited for season 2. So, like, if you had bucket list items, what would you want to see from season 2?
Oh my gosh, season 2. I guess just more Jane and Guilford. I would actually love to see
Oh
them
yeah.
like kind of like join the rebellion and then like become like spearheads of the rebellion. I think that would be
Mm-hmm.
really fun. I think it'll be really fun to see Jane out of like a castle, because she's been like a noble lady her whole life.
Yeah.
So seeing her have to kind of adjust to being like a regular person, like a peasant in Tudor England, I think will be very funny, because I think she's gonna like realize that she's had it good for a really long time, and I think that will be really funny.
I think she's gonna be better at dealing with that than Guilford is. I think Guilford's gonna realize, like, I think Guilford's gonna have a harder time. Like, yes, he goes out on the town as like as a tavern and stuff, but well, then again, he does literally live
He,
the pasture all day for all
I
half
was
his
like,
life.
I mean, he is a
He's actually
horse
probably okay with
though.
that. He is a horse. I really would like to see. I think it would be really fun if they kind of play into that whole Ring of Spy Masters thing you were talking about with Elizabeth. Because if we're gonna in this season 2 that you and I are writing right now, Morgan, if we're gonna oust Mary and make Elizabeth the queen,
Yeah,
she's gonna need her spy network. And I
yeah,
sort of
I think
love
so.
that
Yeah,
idea. How
yeah,
fun would that be to have like all the Ethians and they're starting the spy network and things just go to shit? I do love this idea of bringing in Mary, Queen of Scots. Maybe the French come in. I really love your idea of Philip of Spain. Like, how cool would it be for us to step outside of England to like actually go to a different place? And then season 3, we could have Elizabeth as the
oh,
queen.
we can do so
And what's
much.
the
The Spanish
What's the
Armada we could get
Yes,
into.
I was like the Spanish Armada. In my head, I was saying the Spanish Armadillo, which was not correct.
I mean, it could. There, honestly, in this show, it could be a Spanish armadillo. That's the thing about this show.
It's literally they're like the Spanish Armada is here, and then like Lord Dudley's like, no, it's actually a Spanish armadillo,
I'm
and it
sorry,
literally is
I
just
misspoke.
an armadillo. And he's an armadillo, and he just across the screen, and it's just like deadpan. The whole place is just they're like,
Everyone's just
that's
quiet.
it, and then they just kick
Oh.
it. That's it.
We've over prepared for this.
We have written season 3, the Spanish Armadillo.
Spanish armadillo, the tale of the Spanish armadillo.
There it is.
We've got you guys. You know, if you're hiring, we've got all kinds of ideas.
We've got all the puns for you.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Man. Okay. So I think that's going to wrap it up. The last thing I'll say is that the marketing for this is spectacular.
It's been really
the book
good.
talk girlies, everybody's on it. So if you've not watched My Lady Jane, first off, why did you listen to this whole episode? You just spoiled so many things about
We spoiled
about
everything for you. Sorry.
so much. But I think I'm totally going to rewatch it. Every time I see a clip, I'm liking it. I'm sending it to my friends. All the book talk girlies, we're rewatching it. I'm really going to enjoy rewatching it again now with that guise of like how we were talking about the idea of enemies to lovers and growths and how characters change and like can he learn to forgive himself and can he learn to be loved and accept that he is loved. Like now I'm going to watch this whole season again with that in mind and be like even more emotionally compromised when they're jumping over the flames in that
It's
really
so beautiful.
cheesy
He's
moment.
learned to love himself.
Learn to love himself and forgive and let himself be loved. Like
So good.
it's yeah, it's so good. It's so good.
So good.
but
It's so
yeah,
good,
that's
you
gonna
guys.
wrap
You
it
should
up.
watch it if you haven't.
It's so good. You guys should watch this. Morgan, where can people find you online? Where can people listen to more of your historical awesomeness?
Oh yeah, I wish I could bring this out more often on Supergirl Radio, the podcast that I'm co-host of. But there's not that many chances to like wrap in Tudor history. But if there is, I will
Correct.
do it. So you should check me out on Supergirl Radio, where we've been talking about my adventures with Superman. Almost said Supergirl, but she's in this season of My Adventures with Superman. Rebecca, my co-host, is currently jaunting around Ireland, going to castles and things. But she'll be back soon, and we'll be finishing up the season. So you have some opportunities to catch up while we are on a little break.
I love that. You guys
So
can
nice.
find me on Instagram, Amy_HYP. We'll try to release this episode tomorrow or Friday, so you might have 1 or 2 chances to come see me in Much Ado About Nothing in Temecula, but you'll definitely be able to see me at Comic-Con. After that, yeah, we definitely have a lot of romance tropes. We totally have an enemies to like lovers thing going on between Benedict and Beatrice. And there's one thing that we blocked that I was like, yeah, this is totally like my book talk brain girly really wanted to block this, where they're having like a battle of wits and they walk past each other and at one point they're both center stage and they look at each other and he basically says, I am loved of all the ladies, looks at her and says, all accepting you, and they cross past each other and then they start circling back towards each other, and each time they're speaking they're walking towards each other throwing insults until the point where they're literally nose to nose.
Oh,
And it's
drama.
very cute.
I love it.
Yeah, we wanted to throw in that little like underlying sexual chemistry, but also the chemistry that we're trying to play it in that they're throwing insults at each other, but they're also kind of having fun with this. Like, this is fun for them. This thing where they're yelling at each other and pretending they hate each other, they actually are just having a really good time with it. But it's a lot of fun. So if you guys are interested, shakespeareandthevines.org. Even if you don't make it to that, the rest of the Shakespeare and the Vines season is really great. They're doing King Lear and Julius Caesar, which I'm hoping to help out with a little bit, maybe with some script supervising stuff, because as it turns out, when you're doing King Lear, you need a lot of help making sure you get your words right, because King Lear is a beast of a show.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've actually never seen it.
King Lear's very complicated, and it's historically one of his, I have it in the back there, one of his longest that you have to cut down. But the whole idea of the plot is that the King Lear, is going mad. So he's having trouble with reality. So it can be really
Mm.
challenging when you're in a Shakespearean language and a character is talking
Oh
about a
God, yes.
reality that doesn't necessarily exist, and you as the audience are having trouble following it. So it's one where you have to make sure your words are right, that you are getting
I I am sure
the
I've told
syntax, the
you
punctuation
I've
right.
asked you this before, Amy, but have you ever seen Slings and Arrows? It's like,
Mm-mm.
it's a Canadian, television show, like a 3-season Canadian TV show. I think you would love it,
Mm-hmm.
actually. It's one of my favorite shows, and they do every season, they do, like, a couple plays, like, for the 1st season, they do, Macbeth, and then
Ooh,
I think or maybe that was for season 2. Anyway, they 1st season they do, I think it's Macbeth, the 2nd season they do what's the Scottish one? Um
that's
is that
Macbeth.
Macbeth? That's Macbeth. Okay. So the
Hamlet? Are
first
you
season
thinking
they
about
do
Hamlet?
Hamlet. The first season they do
Yeah.
Hamlet. The second season they do Macbeth. The third season they do King Lear. So all of my
Oh,
knowledge of King Lear is just what I've sort of filtered through Slings and Arrows.
interesting.
So I know just enough about like what it's about, the general outlines of what it's about, but I've
Mm-hmm.
never actually seen it or read it, which is funny.
The one on Prime Video with Anthony Hopkins is accessible enough to follow. It's got it's really good. It's got Florence Pugh in it. It's actually
Oh,
it was the first production of King Lear I'd ever seen. I really liked it. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for us. Thank you guys so much for listening and joining in. A couple of things. You can find us on Twitter, legends_podcast. You can email us, thelegendaryladies@gmail.com. And find us on Instagram, The Legendary Ladies. You can also find us on Patreon and support us. If you had been a patron, you could have joined us today live for this talk about Book Talk Horse Girlies.
yeah.
We love, 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 love hearing from fans. So let us know your thoughts. If you're like, Amy, I don't know what you're talking about. We heard all kinds of criticism about My Lady Jane. Please send it to me so I can
Yes.
argue about why
Yes.
that's not actually criticism. If you have thoughts about
We'll
enemies
tell
to
you why they're
lovers,
wrong.
I'll tell you why they're wrong. But yeah, we really appreciate all of our listeners. We've had a lot of fun with this. Maybe Morgan and I will do more like historical podcast episodes because we know
Ooh,
a lot of Tudor stuff.
we do
Um,
actually.
we're gonna
Ooh, I think Amy has frozen. I was giving her a second. I'm gonna give her a second just to see if she comes back. It might be that her computer battery finally died. Not quite sure. Uh,
did
oh,
my
are you
did
back?
my did my internet die?
You froze for a
Am I
second.
back? That's so funny.
You,
It just did a little. Yep, it just paused just long enough. How
oh,
frustrating! I was literally
weird.
signing us off, and it was like,
I like that
nope,
we were almost
circle bowl
done
of death.
too. That's so brutal.
So close.
So close.
Classic. So
Um,
thank you
I
guys
did
so
wanna
much for joining us. We appreciate every one of you.
Oh, I
Oh yeah.
just wanted to hop in and say, we haven't worked out our schedule, but there's a strong possibility given
Mm,
Comic-Con that we might be off next week. Um,
mm,
because it might be hard to find a recording window. So if we don't have an episode next week, do not despair. It's because of Comic-Con, and I'm sure Amy and Kat will come back with a lot of fun stories to share with us
yes.
all of us who aren't at Comic-Con.
Maybe we'll do
Womp
some
womp.
live streams from Comic Con. That could be kind of
Oh
fun
my
for our
god, you guys
patrons.
should do
That
that
could
for
be really
sure.
fun. We'll do like a dinner time live stream. Like join us live and
You
like
guys
Q
should
and A
you guys
live.
should do a mukbang from
Oh my gosh, we're gonna
Comic-Con.
totally do that. Oh my gosh, yes. We'll find like a
Comic-Con
really good
mukbang.
taco place. We go to the same taco place every year. Yeah,
There you
we'll
go.
figure something out. We're gonna do something cool. I love it. Rocket tacos. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed My Lady Jane conversation and stay legendary.